You wake up every morning, check your bank account, and feel that familiar knot in your stomach. You work harder than most men around you. You sacrifice weekends, skip vacations, say no to things you actually want, and yet, somehow, wealth seems to slip through your fingers like sand. You watch other men who seem to work less, stress less, yet they prosper effortlessly. And deep down, in that place you rarely visit, you wonder if you're missing something fundamental about how money really works. Here's what I discovered as the richest man who ever lived. Wealth is not attracted to good intentions, long hours, or even talent. Wealth is drawn to very specific types of men. Men who understand ancient principles that have nothing to do with the motivational garbage you see everywhere today. I'm Solomon, and 3,000 years ago, when I ruled over the greatest kingdom on earth, I didn't just accumulate gold and silver by accident. I understood something most men never will. There are exactly 5 types of men who become magnets for prosperity. Not because they're lucky, not because they're born special, but because they embody characteristics that wealth cannot resist. Tonight, I'm going to show you these 5 types. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to become one of them. This isn't about changing your morning routine or repeating affirmations in the mirror. This is about a complete transformation of who you are at your core, from a man who chases money to a man money chases. But I must warn you, this knowledge comes with a price. Once you understand why wealth has been avoiding you, you'll never be able to lie to yourself again about what needs to change. You'll see clearly which type of man you've been, and more importantly, which type you must become. If you're tired of being the man who works hardest but gains least, if you're ready to stop wondering why prosperity seems to choose everyone but you, then what I'm about to reveal will change everything. But you must be willing to look in the mirror without flinching. This is not motivation. This is revelation. And if you're serious about transformation, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to share goes against everything modern society has taught you about wealth. Number 1. The selective nature of wealth, according to Solomon. Look around you. Look at the men you know who work the hardest. The ones who wake up at 4 in the morning, who sacrifice their health, who miss their children's birthdays because they're chasing another dollar. Look at them closely. Are they wealthy? Truly wealthy? Or are they trapped in a cycle of exhaustion, always one step away from financial disaster, always wondering why their efforts never seem to multiply into lasting prosperity? Now look at the men who seem to prosper effortlessly, the ones who sleep well at night, whose bank accounts grow while they vacation, whose investments compound while they spend time with their families. What separates these two groups is not luck, genetics, or even opportunity. What separates them is understanding a fundamental truth that I learned 3,000 years ago when I ruled over the greatest kingdom on earth. Money is selective. Wealth is not a charity. It does not distribute itself based on who deserves it most, who suffers most, or who works hardest. Wealth flows according to ancient principles that most men ignore, deny, or never learn. This is the first and most brutal truth you must accept if you ever want to escape the prison of financial mediocrity. You have been told lies your entire life. You have been told that if you are a good person, if you work hard, if you sacrifice, if you follow the rules, prosperity will come. This is not just false. It is dangerously false. It keeps men trapped in patterns that guarantee failure while they believe they are doing everything right. I have watched kingdoms rise and fall. I have seen men with noble hearts die in poverty, while men with questionable morals build empires. I have observed merchants who barely worked accumulate more wealth than farmers who toiled from sunrise to sunset. This disturbed me until I understood the deeper principle at work. Money does not respond to moral worth. It responds to alignment with its nature. Wealth is not attracted to suffering. It is attracted to wisdom. It does not flow toward need. It flows toward understanding. It does not multiply in the hands of the desperate. It multiplies in the hands of the disciplined. Think of money as water. Water does not choose where to flow based on which ground deserves it most. Water flows downhill, following the path of least resistance, pooling in the lowest places, always obeying the laws of gravity and physics. Wealth operates similarly. It flows toward men who create the right conditions, who understand its nature, who align themselves with its principles. When I was young, before wisdom came to me, I thought wealth was random. I saw righteous men struggle, while wicked men prospered, and I was troubled. But God showed me something deeper. He showed me that wealth is part of a larger system, a divine order that rewards certain characteristics and behaviors regardless of the moral character of the person displaying them. This is why you see dishonest men become rich, while honest men stay poor. This is why you see lazy men inherit fortunes, while hardworking men never escape debt. The issue is not that the system is broken. The issue is that you have been measuring success by the wrong standards. I am Solomon. When I asked God for wisdom to rule his people, I received not just wisdom but wealth beyond measure. Gold flowed to me like rivers. Silver became as common as stones in Jerusalem during my reign. But this did not happen because I was more deserving than other kings. It happened because I understood and applied principles that attract prosperity. My authority on wealth is not theoretical. I did not write about money from a position of lack or hope. I wrote from a position of abundance so vast that it has never been equaled in human history. The Queen of Sheba traveled across the known world just to witness my prosperity. Kings came to me for counsel not just on matters of state, but on matters of abundance. But here is what most men miss when they study my life. My wealth was not the goal, it was the result. It was the natural consequence of aligning myself with divine principles that govern how resources flow in this world. I understood that money is not evil, nor is it random. It is a tool that responds to wisdom, discipline, and purpose. The teachings I left behind were not written for common men living common lives. They were written for men who aspired to rulership, leadership, and dominion. They were instructions for men who wanted to build kingdoms, not just survive another day. This is why so many men today find my proverbs difficult to apply. They are trying to use royal principles for peasant problems. But you are not here by accident. You are not watching this because you want to stay where you are. Something inside you recognizes that you were meant for more. Something inside you knows that the life you are living is smaller than the life you were designed for. That recognition is the beginning of wisdom. That dissatisfaction is the first qualification for wealth. Wealth seeks men who understand that prosperity is not about getting what you deserve. It is about becoming who you need to be. It is not about working harder. It is about thinking differently. It is not about suffering more. It is about aligning more completely with the principles that govern abundance. The men money seeks are not necessarily the best men. They are the men who best understand money's nature. They are not the most moral. They are the most aligned. They are not the most deserving. They are the most prepared. This truth will either liberate you or offend you. If it offends you, you are not ready for wealth. If it liberates you, you have taken the first step toward attracting it. The choice is yours, but the principle remains the same regardless of your feelings about it. Number 2, the true meaning of diligence. You think you know what hard work means. You think diligence is about sweat, exhaustion, and the burning ache in your muscles at the end of a long day. You have been taught that success belongs to the man who works the longest hours, who sacrifices the most, who pushes himself beyond his limits day after day. But I am here to shatter that illusion because it is keeping you poor. I wrote that the hand of the diligent makes rich, but few men understand what diligence actually means. They read those words and immediately think of physical labor, of grinding through repetitive tasks, of showing up even when they feel like giving up. This misunderstanding has trapped millions of men in cycles of hard work that lead nowhere. True diligence is not about working harder. It is about working with purpose, direction, and long-term vision. It is not about doing more of the same thing. It is about doing the right things consistently over time. It is not about exhausting your body. It is about training your mind to think like a king instead of a slave. I have watched men work themselves to death while remaining poor. I have seen farmers plow the same field for decades without improving their techniques, wondering why their harvest never increases. I have observed merchants repeat the same failing strategies year after year, believing that more effort will somehow produce different results. This is not diligence. This is the definition of insanity. The diligent man begins with his mind. Before he lifts a finger, he studies, he observes, he plans. He asks himself not just what needs to be done, but why it needs to be done, and whether there is a better way to do it. He understands that every hour spent in careful planning saves 10 hours of misdirected effort. While other men rush into action, the diligent man sits quietly and thinks. While other men boast about how busy they are, the diligent man focuses on being effective. While other men measure their worth by how tired they are at the end of the day, the diligent man measures his worth by how much closer he is to his ultimate goal. Diligence is the ability to delay gratification. It is saying no to immediate pleasures that compromise long-term gains. It is choosing to invest when you could spend, to save when you could splurge, to study when you could be entertained. Most men fail not because they cannot work hard, but because they cannot wait for their work to compound into something meaningful. I remember a story from my youth. Before I became king, there were two farmers who worked adjacent fields. One farmer worked from sunrise to sunset every day, never taking a break, never stopping to rest. The other farmer worked intensely for part of the day, then spent hours studying his crops, learning about soil conditions, observing weather patterns, and planning improvements. The first farmer mocked the second, calling him lazy, questioning his work ethic. But year after year, the second farmer's harvest grew larger, while the first farmer's remained the same. The difference was not in the amount of effort, but in the type of effort. One man worked in his field, the other man worked on his field. This is the distinction that separates men who attract wealth from men who repel it. The man who attracts wealth understands that his most important work happens in his mind. He knows that changing his thinking will change his results faster than changing his effort level. True diligence requires you to master your impulses. While other men chase every opportunity that presents itself, the diligent man chooses carefully. While other men get distracted by every new trend, every get-rich-quick scheme, every emotional decision, the diligent man stays focused on his core strategy. The battle for diligence is fought and won in your mind before it ever reaches your hands. Every morning, you wake up with a choice. You can let your emotions, your impulses, and your immediate desires drive your decisions, or you can let your long-term vision guide your actions. The diligent man chooses his vision over his feelings every single time. This is why most men never develop true diligence. They mistake emotional decision-making for passion. They mistake impulsive action for urgency. They mistake being busy for being productive. They never learn to distinguish between motion and progress. The diligent man develops systems. He creates routines that produce results regardless of how he feels on any given day. He builds habits that work for him even when he is not thinking about them. He understands that success is not about having one great day, but about having consistently good days for years. While other men are looking for shortcuts, the diligent man is building processes. While other men are seeking quick wins, the diligent man is constructing foundations. While other men are celebrating small victories, the diligent man is planning his next phase of growth. But here is what most men never realize about diligence. It is not just about what you do. It is about who you become. The process of developing true diligence transforms your character, your patience, your wisdom, and your capacity to handle larger opportunities when they arise. Money respects diligence because money itself is diligent. Money never sleeps. Money is always working, always looking for opportunities to multiply, always flowing towards situations where it can be most productive. When money encounters a truly diligent man, it recognizes a kindred spirit. The diligent man does not chase money. He creates conditions that make money want to stay with him. He builds systems that allow money to multiply in his care. He develops habits that protect money from being wasted or lost. This is why wealth accumulates around diligent men and evaporates around everyone else. If you want to attract wealth, stop measuring your diligence by how tired you are. Start measuring it by how thoughtfully you plan, how consistently you execute, how patiently you wait for results, and how wisely you learn from both success and failure. That is the diligence that makes men rich. Number 3. The 5 traits of men who attract wealth. There is a type of man that money cannot resist. He does not chase wealth, yet wealth chases him. He does not obsess over riches, yet riches flow toward him like rivers toward the sea. He does not manipulate or scheme for prosperity, yet prosperity seems to arrange itself around his life naturally. You have seen such men, and you have wondered what they possess that you do not. I am about to reveal the 5 characteristics that define these men. These are not theories or motivational concepts. These are observable patterns that I have studied across kingdoms and generations. When you encounter a man who possesses all 5 traits, you will find a man who attracts wealth regardless of his background, education, or circumstances. The first trait is spiritual vision, aligned with financial goals. These men do not see money as separate from their spiritual life. They do not compartmentalize their faith and their finances. They understand that wealth is a tool for fulfilling divine purpose, not an end in itself. They pursue prosperity not because they love money, but because they love what money allows them to accomplish. This spiritual alignment gives them patience that other men lack. While ordinary men panic during financial difficulties, these men remain calm because they trust that their work serves a higher purpose. While ordinary men make desperate decisions when money is tight, these men continue making wise decisions because they are not driven by fear. They pray about business decisions. They seek divine guidance on investments. They view their work as ministry and their success as stewardship. This spiritual foundation makes them attractive to wealth because money feels safe in the hands of men who view it as sacred responsibility rather than personal gratification. The second trait is control over impulses and desires. These men have learned to say no to themselves. They say no to purchases that feel good but serve no strategic purpose. They say no to distractions that steal their focus. They say no to people who drain their energy without adding value to their mission. While other men are controlled by their cravings, these men control their cravings. While other men justify emotional spending by calling it rewards or treating themselves, these men evaluate every financial decision through the filter of long-term impact. They understand that every dollar spent impulsively is a dollar that cannot compound into wealth. They have trained themselves to delay gratification. When they want something, they wait. When they feel the urge to spend, they pause. When they encounter temptation, they remember their larger goals. This self-control creates space for wisdom to operate in their financial decisions. But their self-control extends beyond money. They control their tongues, speaking carefully and thoughtfully rather than reactively. They control their time, protecting it from activities that do not align with their priorities. They control their attention, focusing deeply on important matters rather than scattering their mental energy across trivial concerns. The third trait is the ability to multiply, not just earn. These men think in terms of assets, not just income. They think in terms of systems, not just transactions. They think in terms of long-term growth, not just immediate payment. They understand the difference between working for money and making money work for them. When they receive money, their first thought is not what they can buy with it, but how they can invest it. When they encounter an opportunity, they evaluate it not just by immediate profit, but by its potential to generate ongoing returns. When they make financial decisions, they consider compound effects over time rather than just immediate consequences. They study investments. They learn about markets. They understand business principles. They develop multiple income streams. They create systems that generate money even when they are not actively working. This multiplication mindset separates them from men who only know how to trade time for money. The fourth trait is aversion to waste. These men despise inefficiency in all its forms. They hate wasting time on unproductive activities. They hate wasting money on unnecessary purchases. They hate wasting energy on pointless arguments. They hate wasting opportunities through procrastination or poor planning. This aversion to waste makes them naturally efficient. They find ways to accomplish more with less effort. They eliminate activities that do not serve their goals. They streamline their processes and systematize their approaches. They value their resources too highly to squander them carelessly. But their aversion to waste goes deeper than mere frugality. They waste nothing because they understand that everything has potential value if used correctly. They see opportunity where others see obstacles. They find value where others see only problems. This perspective allows them to extract maximum benefit from every situation. The fifth trait is connection with eternal principles. These men base their decisions on timeless truths rather than temporary trends. They follow principles that have worked for thousands of years rather than chasing strategies that are popular right now. They build their lives on foundations that cannot be shaken by changing circumstances. They understand that honesty always pays in the long run, even when it costs in the short run. They know that integrity creates trust, and trust creates opportunity. They believe that consistent character eventually produces consistent results. They live by principles that transcend cultures, economies, and generations. This connection to eternal principles gives them stability that other men lack. When markets crash, they remain calm because they trust in principles that are larger than markets. When trends change, they adapt without panic because they are anchored to truths that do not change. When others are confused by circumstances, they remain clear because they navigate by eternal principles rather than temporary conditions. These 5 traits work together to create a man that money finds irresistible. His spiritual alignment gives him purpose. His self-control gives him wisdom. His multiplication mindset gives him growth. His aversion to waste gives him efficiency. His connection to eternal principles gives him stability. When these traits combine in one man, wealth flows toward him naturally because he has created the perfect environment for money to thrive. He does not have to chase wealth because he has become the type of person that wealth seeks. He does not have to manipulate circumstances because he has aligned himself with the principles that control circumstances. You may possess some of these traits partially. You may recognize elements of yourself in this description, but partial alignment produces partial results. The men who truly attract wealth possess all 5 characteristics fully developed and working in harmony with each other. The question you must ask yourself is not whether you want to be wealthy. The question is whether you are willing to become the type of man that wealth cannot resist. That transformation is possible, but it requires more than wanting different results. It requires becoming a different person. Number 4. The 4 causes of financial stagnation in men. You know men who should be wealthy but are not. Men with intelligence, talent, work ethic, and good intentions. Yet they remain trapped in financial mediocrity year after year. You may be one of these men yourself. You follow the conventional wisdom, you work harder than your peers, you make sacrifices others will not make. Yet prosperity continues to elude you, like shadows that disappear when you try to grasp them. There are 4 specific reasons why capable men fail to attract wealth, and these reasons have nothing to do with external circumstances, bad luck, or unfair systems. These are internal failures that sabotage success before it can even begin. Understanding these failure patterns is as important as understanding success patterns because you cannot fix what you cannot see. The first cause of financial stagnation is lack of applied wisdom. Notice that I did not say lack of wisdom. Many men possess wisdom but fail to apply it consistently. They know what they should do but do not do what they know. They understand correct principles, but live according to incorrect habits. They can give excellent advice to others while making terrible decisions for themselves. I have watched men study success principles for years, collecting books and attending seminars, becoming experts on theoretical wealth building while their own bank accounts remain empty. They mistake learning about prosperity for actually pursuing it. They confuse intellectual understanding with practical application. Knowledge without application is not wisdom. It is merely information. Information that sits in your mind without influencing your behavior is worthless. In fact, it is worse than worthless because it creates the illusion of progress while preventing real progress from occurring. These men often become students forever, always learning but never implementing, always preparing but never acting, always planning but never executing. They use learning as a sophisticated form of procrastination, convincing themselves that they need just a little more knowledge before they can begin building wealth. But wisdom is proven through results, not through knowledge. A man who knows one principle and applies it consistently will create more wealth than a man who knows 100 principles but applies none of them. The goal is not to become an expert on wealth. The goal is to become wealthy. The second cause of financial stagnation is impatience and obsession with quick results. These men want to harvest without sowing, to reap without planting, to enjoy compound returns without compound time. They abandon every strategy before it has time to work because they expect immediate results from long-term processes. Wealth building is like growing a tree. You plant a seed, water it, protect it, and wait. For months, you see nothing above ground while the root system develops below. Men who are obsessed with quick results judge the process too early, decide the seed is defective, dig it up, and plant something else, never allowing anything to reach maturity. I have watched men start businesses and quit after 6 months because they were not immediately profitable. I have seen men begin investment programs and abandon them after 1 year because the returns seemed too slow. I have observed men learn new skills and give up before mastering them because progress felt too gradual. This impatience is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of how wealth actually accumulates. Wealth is not created by dramatic events or sudden breakthroughs. Wealth is created by consistent actions compounded over time. It is built slowly, steadily, and systematically by men who understand that patience is a profitable virtue. The men who obsess over quick results are actually sabotaging their own long-term prosperity. Every time they quit a strategy before it has time to work, they reset their compound clock back to zero. They spend their entire lives starting over instead of building upon previous progress. The third cause of financial stagnation is self-deception and lack of personal review. These men refuse to examine their results honestly. They make excuses for failure instead of learning from it. They blame external circumstances instead of adjusting internal strategies. They convince themselves that they are on the right path, despite evidence to the contrary. Self-deception is the most dangerous form of deception because the deceiver and the deceived are the same person. When you lie to yourself, there is no one left to tell you the truth. When you refuse to face reality about your results, you guarantee that those results will continue. These men create elaborate stories to explain their lack of progress. They blame the economy, their background, their education, their circumstances, other people, bad timing, or unfair systems. They spend more energy defending their failures than they spend trying to overcome them. But the most successful men are the most honest about their failures. They face reality directly, even when reality is uncomfortable. They take responsibility for their results, even when external factors contributed to those results. They use failure as information rather than as an excuse. Regular self-review is essential for financial progress. You must regularly examine your strategies, measure your results, and adjust your approach based on what you discover. Men who never review their financial performance never improve their financial performance. The fourth cause of financial stagnation is hidden vices that drain the soul and wallet. These are the secret habits, addictions, and toxic patterns that operate below the surface of a man's life, slowly destroying his capacity for prosperity from within. These vices are often invisible to others and sometimes even to the man himself. They may seem harmless or minor, but they create energy leaks that prevent wealth from accumulating. Like tiny holes in a bucket, they ensure that no matter how much water you pour in, the bucket never fills. Some of these vices are obvious: gambling, excessive drinking, compulsive spending, or sexual addictions that drain both money and mental energy. But others are more subtle: chronic negativity that repels opportunity, perfectionism that prevents action, pride that rejects help, or fear that avoids risk. The most dangerous vices are the ones that masquerade as virtues. The man who calls his procrastination careful planning. The man who calls his fear of risk responsible caution. The man who calls his lack of ambition contentment. The man who calls his failure to study laziness humility. These hidden vices operate like spiritual cancer, eating away at a man's potential while he remains unaware of their presence. They whisper excuses into his mind, justify poor decisions, and gradually lower his standards until mediocrity feels normal. But here is what most men never realize about these vices. They are not just destroying your wealth, they are destroying your worthiness for wealth. Money flows toward men of strong character because money requires strong character to handle responsibly. When you tolerate vices in your life, you signal to the universe that you are not ready for the responsibility of prosperity. The path to financial breakthrough often requires moral breakthrough first. You must identify and eliminate the hidden vices that are sabotaging your success. You must face the uncomfortable truth about your own character and commit to the difficult work of transformation. These 4 causes of financial stagnation work together to create a perfect storm of mediocrity. Lack of applied wisdom prevents you from taking correct action. Impatience prevents you from staying on the correct path long enough for it to work. Self-deception prevents you from correcting course when you stray. Hidden vices prevent you from developing the character necessary for lasting prosperity. Breaking free from financial stagnation requires addressing all 4 causes simultaneously. You must apply wisdom, not just learn it. You must develop patience for long-term results. You must face reality about your current performance, and you must eliminate the hidden vices that are sabotaging your success from within. The good news is that once you identify these patterns in your life, you can begin to change them. But change requires honesty, courage, and commitment to transformation that goes deeper than your financial situation. It requires becoming a different type of man entirely. Number 5. The contrast between the men money seeks and the ones it leaves. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must face the brutal truth about his relationship with money. Not the story he tells himself about why he is not wealthy. Not the excuses he makes for his financial situation. Not the blame he places on external circumstances. But the raw, unfiltered reality of whether he is the type of man that money seeks or the type of man that money leaves behind. This moment of truth is rarely comfortable. It requires looking in the mirror without flinching, examining your life without making excuses, and accepting responsibility for results you may not want to own. But this moment is also the gateway to transformation, because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. I am going to ask you a question that will reveal everything about your financial future. Are you among the men money is drawn to, or those it abandons? Your immediate emotional reaction to this question will tell you more about your wealth potential than any assessment or evaluation could. If this question makes you defensive, if it triggers anger or resentment, if your first instinct is to explain why it is not fair, or why external circumstances make it impossible to answer, then you already have your answer. You are among the men money leaves behind, and your defensiveness is one of the reasons why. If this question makes you curious, if it inspires self-reflection, if it motivates you to examine your habits and character with honest scrutiny, then you demonstrate the teachability that wealth requires. You show the humility that prosperity respects. You reveal the willingness to change that abundance demands. The men money seeks understand that money is not obligated to come to them. They know that wealth is not a human right or a guarantee. They recognize that prosperity must be earned through alignment with specific principles, and they take full responsibility for creating that alignment in their lives. The men money leaves behind believe that wealth owes them something. They think that because they work hard, because they are good people, because they have needs or desires, money should flow to them automatically. They expect prosperity without understanding its requirements. The men money seeks think in terms of value creation. They ask themselves what they can contribute, what problems they can solve, what needs they can meet. They focus on becoming more valuable to the marketplace, rather than demanding more from the marketplace. The men money leaves behind think in terms of value extraction. They ask what they can get, what they deserve, what others should give them. They focus on taking more from the marketplace, rather than offering more to the marketplace. The men money seeks view setbacks as education. They extract lessons from every failure, wisdom from every mistake, and strategy adjustments from every disappointment. They see obstacles as training rather than as proof that success is impossible. The men money leaves behind view setbacks as evidence of unfairness. They use failures to justify giving up, mistakes to prove that the system is rigged, and disappointments to validate their victim mentality. They see obstacles as walls rather than as stepping stones. The men money seeks invest in themselves relentlessly. They study, they learn, they grow, they improve their skills and expand their knowledge. They understand that becoming wealthy requires becoming the type of person who can create and maintain wealth. The men money leaves behind expect wealth to come to them as they are. They want prosperity without transformation, success without development, rewards without growth. They resist the changes that wealth requires because they prefer comfort to improvement. The men money seeks delay gratification strategically. They sacrifice temporary pleasures for permanent gains. They invest today for tomorrow's returns. They choose long-term prosperity over short-term satisfaction. The men money leaves behind prioritize immediate gratification. They spend for temporary pleasure at the expense of permanent gain. They choose today's comfort over tomorrow's freedom. They sacrifice their future for their present. The men money seeks take complete responsibility for their results. They own their successes and their failures equally. They control what they can control and adapt to what they cannot control. They see themselves as the primary factor in their financial outcomes. The men money leaves behind blame external factors for their results. They credit luck for successes and circumstances for failures. They focus on what they cannot control and ignore what they can control. They see themselves as victims of their financial circumstances rather than creators of them. This contrast is not just about different behaviors or strategies. It represents fundamentally different ways of thinking about life, responsibility, and relationship with abundance. The men money seeks have developed what I call a prosperity consciousness. The men money leaves behind remain trapped in a scarcity consciousness. Prosperity consciousness sees opportunity, where scarcity consciousness sees obstacles. Prosperity consciousness asks how to make things work, while scarcity consciousness explains why things cannot work. Prosperity consciousness focuses on possibilities, while scarcity consciousness focuses on limitations. But here is what most men never understand about this contrast. It is not fixed. You are not permanently assigned to one category or the other based on your current circumstances. The type of man you are today is not the type of man you must remain tomorrow. Every day, you make choices that move you toward one category or the other. Every decision either develops prosperity consciousness or reinforces scarcity consciousness. Every thought pattern either attracts wealth or repels it. The question is not where you have been. The question is where you are going. The question is not what type of man you have been. The question is what type of man you choose to become. This video is not just entertainment or motivation. It is a mirror designed to show you exactly where you stand in relationship to wealth. It is a diagnostic tool that reveals whether your current mindset and behaviors align with prosperity or poverty. But more than a mirror, this video is a choice point. It is an opportunity to decide which type of man you will be from this moment forward. It is a chance to begin the transformation from someone money leaves behind to someone money seeks. The choice is yours, but the consequences of that choice are not optional. If you choose to remain as you are, your financial results will remain as they are. If you choose to transform into the type of man money seeks, your financial results will transform accordingly. There is no neutral ground in this battle. Every day that you do not actively develop the characteristics that attract wealth, you reinforce the characteristics that repel it. Every moment you delay transformation, you strengthen the patterns that keep you trapped. The men money seeks understand this urgency. They know that time is their most valuable asset, and that every day spent without progress is a day that cannot be recovered. They act with the knowledge that wealth building is a race against time, complacency, and mediocrity. The question remains before you. Are you among the men money is drawn to, or those it abandons? Your answer will determine not just your financial future, but the entire trajectory of your life. Number 6. The intended audience of Solomon's teachings. When I wrote the Proverbs that have guided nations and built kingdoms for 3,000 years, I was not writing for everyone. I was not offering advice for the masses who would remain content with ordinary lives and average results. I was writing specifically for men who aspired to rulership, leadership, and dominion. I was preparing future kings. This distinction is crucial because it explains why so many men struggle to apply my teachings to their lives. They try to use royal principles for peasant problems. They attempt to apply kingdom strategies to survival situations. They seek to implement leadership wisdom while thinking like followers. My Proverbs were written for men preparing to govern others because only men who can govern themselves are qualified to govern others. They were written for men preparing to manage vast resources because only men who can manage their own resources wisely can be trusted with the resources of others. They were written for men preparing to make decisions that affect generations because only men with long-term vision can make decisions that produce long-term results. But here is what most men miss about the nature of kingship. A king is not defined by his title, his palace, or his crown. A king is defined by his character, his thinking, and his approach to responsibility. Kingship is not about ruling over others. Kingship is about ruling over yourself so completely that others naturally want to follow your leadership. Every man has a kingdom. Your kingdom may be your family, your business, your community, or simply your own life. But regardless of the size of your domain, the principles of effective rulership remain the same. The man who rules his small kingdom well will be given authority over larger kingdoms. The man who cannot rule himself will lose even what little authority he has. Money recognizes kingship. Wealth flows toward men who demonstrate the capacity for wise dominion. Resources gravitate toward those who have proven their ability to manage resources effectively. Opportunity seeks out men who have shown themselves capable of handling opportunity responsibly. This is why money avoids men who think like subjects rather than rulers. Money does not respect men who wait for permission to succeed, who blame others for their circumstances, who expect someone else to solve their problems. Money seeks men who take initiative, who accept responsibility, who create solutions, rather than waiting for solutions to be provided. The difference between kingly thinking and subject thinking is profound. A subject asks what he can get. A king asks what he can give. A subject focuses on being served. A king focuses on serving. A subject demands his rights. A king accepts his responsibilities. A subject thinks in terms of scarcity and competition. A king thinks in terms of abundance and creation. A subject sees other successful men as threats. A king sees other successful men as allies and examples. A subject hoards resources out of fear. A king invests resources out of faith. When I taught about money, I was not teaching men how to grab more for themselves. I was teaching them how to create more for everyone. When I discussed wealth building, I was not promoting selfishness. I was promoting stewardship. When I outlined strategies for prosperity, I was preparing men to handle the responsibility that comes with abundance. The man who thinks like a king understands that money is a tool for building something larger than himself. He sees wealth as fuel for his mission, rather than the mission itself. He pursues prosperity not for what it allows him to have, but for what it allows him to accomplish. This perspective changes everything about how he approaches wealth building. Instead of asking how he can make more money, he asks how he can create more value. Instead of focusing on what he can take from the marketplace, he focuses on what he can contribute to the marketplace. Instead of trying to get rich, he tries to become valuable. The kingly man leads himself first. He disciplines his thoughts, controls his emotions, and governs his behavior according to principles rather than impulses. He does not wait for external circumstances to improve before he begins improving himself. He does not postpone responsibility until he feels ready for responsibility. He leads his household with wisdom and strength. He provides not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. He creates an environment where his family can thrive and grow. He prepares his children not just to survive, but to lead their own kingdoms effectively. He leads in his community by example rather than by force. He demonstrates what excellence looks like rather than demanding excellence from others. He shows what integrity produces rather than preaching about what integrity requires. He influences through character rather than through manipulation. He leads in his profession by innovation rather than imitation. He solves problems that others ignore. He creates value where others see only obstacles. He builds solutions that serve not just his immediate needs but the long-term needs of everyone involved. But most importantly, the kingly man leads with a long-term vision that extends beyond his own lifetime. He makes decisions not just based on immediate consequences, but on generational impact. He builds not just for himself, but for his children and his children's children. He creates legacies rather than just bank accounts. This long-term perspective is what separates royal thinking from common thinking. Common men think in terms of months or years. Royal men think in terms of decades and generations. Common men build for themselves. Royal men build for posterity. Money respects this long-term thinking because money itself operates according to long-term principles. Money grows through compound interest over time. Money multiplies through investments that mature slowly. Money accumulates through consistent actions repeated over years and decades. The man who thinks like a king naturally aligns himself with these long-term principles. He makes decisions that may cost him in the short term but benefit him in the long term. He invests in assets that may not produce immediate returns but will produce substantial returns over time. He builds systems that may require years to develop but will generate income for decades. If you want to attract the kind of wealth that I accumulated, you must begin thinking like the kind of king that I was. You must stop approaching money with a subject mentality and start approaching it with a royal mentality. You must stop waiting for permission to prosper and start taking responsibility for prosperity. You must govern your own life so effectively that money recognizes you as someone capable of governing money wisely. You must demonstrate leadership in small matters so that you can be trusted with leadership in large matters. You must prove your kingship in your current circumstances so that you can be promoted to greater circumstances. The kingdom is waiting for you, but the king must emerge from within you first. The crown is available, but the character must develop before the crown can be worn. The wealth is accessible, but the wisdom must be cultivated before the wealth can be managed. My teachings were not written for subjects dreaming of becoming kings. They were written for kings who had not yet claimed their thrones. The question is not whether you have the potential for kingship. The question is whether you have the courage to develop that potential into reality. You are standing at the edge of two worlds now. Behind you lies everything you thought you knew about money, success, and what it means to prosper. Ahead of you stretches a path that few men dare to walk, because it demands not just changing what you do, but transforming who you are at the deepest level. Picture a river that has been flowing in the same direction for years, carving the same patterns into the earth, following the same course toward the same destination. Then imagine the moment when that river encounters new terrain, when it must choose between continuing its familiar path toward stagnation or cutting a new channel toward the ocean. You are that river. Your thoughts, your habits, your relationship with money have been flowing in patterns carved by years of conditioning. But now, you see new terrain. You understand that wealth flows not to those who need it most, but to those who align themselves with its ancient principles. The man you were yesterday believed that working harder would eventually lead to prosperity. The man you are becoming understands that thinking differently will transform everything faster than any amount of additional effort ever could. This awakening cannot be undone. You cannot return to believing that money is random or that prosperity is reserved for others. You have seen behind the curtain of how wealth actually operates in this world. You know now that every day you remain unchanged. You choose to remain among the men that money abandons. But knowledge alone changes nothing. Understanding without application is merely sophisticated ignorance. The question is not whether these principles make sense to your mind. The question is whether you will allow them to transform your reality. If you feel something stirring within you, if these words are awakening something that has been dormant in your spirit, then you are ready for the deeper teachings. Subscribe now and continue this journey of transformation, because what we have explored tonight is only the foundation of what Solomon knew about the relationship between wisdom and wealth. The path toward becoming the man that money seeks has no end, only deeper levels of alignment with eternal truth.